touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.
Welcome into the latest episode of Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara, joined by the editor of GoDucks.com, Rob Mosley. We're here to preview Oregon's home game against Cal. A couple of Pac-12 North opponents going at it. Cal got off to the fast start this year, Rob, 5-0 to start the season. They were in the top 25. The Ducks, of course, started the season in the top 10 and have fallen out. Both teams unranked at the moment. The Bears come in losers of 3 straight. Oregon winners of 2 straight. But it's an interesting matchup, I think, for Cal because of Oregon's flaws so far this season and the losses. Teams are probably not quite as intimidated or maybe concerned about coming to Autzen Stadium as they have been in past years.
I don't know that anybody is. And you look at betting lines and point spreads, and they're not a perfect indicator of Vegas's predictive thoughts on the game. They're looking for even betting, but the public at large influences that, and it's not like the Ducks are a heavy runaway favorite in a matchup like you'd expect in years past at home. 2 straight home losses is something that hasn't happened around here in a long time. 3 straight would be something that really hasn't happened in a long time. So, Ducks still, I think, in a lot of people's minds, have huge questions to answer. Particularly defensively, coming off that Arizona State game, you understand that. But even offensively, I think that they dropped off the radar without Vernon Adams, and even though he's been so good in such key moments the last couple of weeks, it hasn't really registered as much because I think Oregon has sort of been considered an afterthought since the early part of the season on a national level.
Yeah, the offense, while it's looked great at times, it's really kind of sputtered, or it's been in spurts, and they'll go series where not a whole lot's happening, and then all of a sudden everything starts to click. I mean, it's possible that because of Vernon's late arrival, the injury, everything else, that it's taken longer than anyone would have hoped. But it is possible that they can maybe build off the momentum of last week. Obviously, the way that game ended, making those plays down the stretch for the offense, I think just based on what we saw from practice this week, the walkthrough or the Fast Friday that they do on Friday afternoon, this team just seems to have a little bit of their swagger back on offense.
Yeah, I think, and Vernon Adams' presence is a huge factor in that. I mean, he just carries himself with such charisma and such confidence that trickles down. The receivers certainly feed off that. I imagine the offensive line does, and we know who Royce Freeman is and what he can do. And when it comes to sustaining drives, which I think they need to do on a more consistent basis for sure, that's a lot easier said when you can run the ball. And against Arizona State, whether the Ducks were in a traditional formation or some of the Wildcat stuff they tried, it was usually 1, 2, 3 yards. And then boom, 60-something. But there was so much of those 1, 2, 3 yards that Ducks sort of went away from it. Arizona State was averaging only a couple yards per carry against Pac-12 teams going into that game. So you can understand if you're Scott Frost as a play caller looking at that number going, hey, maybe we'd be wise to try some different things. And they did, and with just enough success overall to get out of there with a win, just barely. But I would suspect that, going against this Cal defense, which has given up a few more rushing yards with Royce Freeman back there, no doubt ready to contribute big time, you'll see a little more balance and may perhaps start extending, more drives and being more consistent that way.
Well, the Oregon offense against the Cal defense that you bring up, the Cal defense through the first 5 games for the Golden Bears when they went unbeaten, was able to produce a lot of turnovers, and that maybe covered up some of their issues defensively since the streak and during this losing stretch. They haven't been as opportunistic. They've improved over the last couple of years, but it might be an area, like you say, either with the running game or the passing game for Oregon to exploit. Yeah,
I mean, the turnover battle is something you want to win every game, and it's just a huge indicator of winning and losing. And you saw early in the season when Cal was doing well, they were getting a lot of takeaways. They're not as much anymore. I mean, Royce Freeman has proven himself to be a pretty sure-handed back. Vernon Adams, we saw, I think, earlier in the year was a little prone to throwing 50-50 balls. I think the last couple weeks we've seen him get on a little better page with all of his receivers. I mean, the early touchdown to Darren Carrington, broke down Arizona State's coverage. Couldn't have been more wide open. Carrington had to play later in the game that he dropped. Same thing. Couldn't have been more wide open. Stanford and Carrington are still guys who can go up and get a ball, But, the only the 50-50 ball from the Arizona State game that jumps out the most, was Dwayne Stanford or Johnny Munt. It wasn't Dwayne Stanford or a Sun Devil defender. So I think we're seeing indications lately that Vernon's less prone to give it away too, which, again, sort of to your point, I think gives you confidence that maybe the Ducks can try to avoid allowing Cal to get a bunch of takeaways that can tilt this one.
The other side of the ball, the Oregon defense against the Cal offense. Jared Goff comes in here. He's a player that's expected to be very highly regarded by the NFL and should be a high draft pick. Had a very rough go at Autzen Stadium in his last trip there during the monsoon. You really can't fault him for that. He was a freshman at the time. He is really, as we saw last year down in the Bay Area against the Ducks, he's just a guy that seems to be able to take a hit unfazed. Reminds me a little of Andrew Luck in his confidence throwing the ball, which has actually hurt him maybe a little bit this year, where he sees that small window and knows that he can get it in there, but has been a little bit more turnover prone with the interception as of late. But a very dangerous quarterback, especially with the receiving core that Cal has, and they have to be licking their chops a little bit with the very inexperienced Oregon secondary.
Yeah, I think we came out of even wins over Eastern Washington and Georgia State earlier in the year thinking, Cal, Washington State with their passing offenses were going to be teams that really gave this Oregon defense trouble. If you look back at the second half of the Colorado game, almost all of the Washington State game, barring the last few minutes, and then the Washington game, this defense was starting to trend in the right direction, and Arizona State was just a complete reversal of that. So you wonder again, kind of what sort of effort are we going to see? I mean, effort, not the question that are they going to play hard, but what kind of outcome are we going to see from this Oregon defense against Cal? Because this did look like a bad matchup a few weeks ago, and now suddenly it looks like a pretty bad matchup again. I think what the Ducks have working for them a little bit. I think Tyree Robinson and Arion Springs as cornerbacks are definitely shown development. Charles Nelson continues to get more comfortable there, and Reggie Daniels, starts in place of Juwan Williams. I think as a guy we all thought was going to be a key contributor this year, hasn't been so far, but a guy who it might be starting to click for as well. So. There's some guys on the back end there that now have some experience, that they've all made enough plays that they can do it. It's just a matter of doing it consistently, being put in the right positions to do so. Oregon's pass rush has been there the last few weeks to support the secondary. So, but there's no doubt that's the key matchup. I mean, what can they try to do to kind of put the reins on Goff?
I will say this: the guy who may scare me the most is Lasco, the running back. He had some success last year running the ball against Oregon, and the way that the Ducks performed in the second level, stopping the run against Arizona State with less accomplished backs, in my opinion, that's an area everybody in the world is going to expect Cal to just throw the crap out of the ball, and you can't forget about their at least potential to run the game.
I do think the Oregon's defensive staff has spoken to the Cal running game enough. This isn't like the Washington State game. And Washington State had some backs that really gashed this Oregon defense. But I think you just assume that was a case of Oregon selling out so much to stop the pass that you're going to give up some things in the run. And until very late in that game, that was a trade-off that had been acceptable. I think in this game, you're going to see the Ducks play a little bit more honest because they expect Cal to be more balanced than Washington State was. Even though Washington State's the easy comparison in terms of how pass-heavy they are, Washington State throws more passes than anybody in the country. Cal's 6th. But it is about a dozen passes per game difference between the two. So they are going to be a little more balanced, and I would expect to see the Oregon defense, at least schematically, respect that more. We'll see if they actually get the results they want to see.
Well, you brought it up earlier. The turnover battle is really where games are won and lost. For Oregon this year, they are 5-0 when they win the turnover battle. They are 0-3 when they don't. So that's going to be a big key in this one. It's going to be probably wet out there in Autzen, not quite to the level of a couple of years ago, but that always makes things a little bit different. And Oregon will try to snap this very rare 2-game losing streak at home in conference play to boot. So it's a big game for the Ducks. 5-3, 3-2 in conference against the Cal Bears, who are 5-3, 2-3 in Pac-12 play so far. 7:30 kickoff on ESPN2. Rob and I will be back early next week to wrap this one up. Hopefully we'll have some good news to report for Duck fans as the Ducks and the Golden Bears battle in Autzen this weekend. In the meantime, if you have any questions, comments for us, you can get to us on Twitter. I am at McNamaraUO. He is at Duck Football. Until next time, we'll see you.
Gets the corner into the end zone for the touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.